morning, all. I'm Jacob Petersmark with United Green. Hope everybody had a good first event so far. We partner with cannabis companies across the United States on all levels of hiring, employee badging. Every state's a little different and unique, and our goal is to help progress the industry. We've been doing it for about 7 years. We're hopeful that everyone has had a good event and continues to learn and progress the industry moving forward. We've been a proud partner of Benzinga for about 6 years now. I'm not joining these guys, but wishing everybody luck. If I haven't connected with you yet, come say hi. We're proud to announce we've, as of last month, hired over 10,000 people into cannabis. But with that being said, welcome Charlie, welcome Jesse. Good luck, guys. Enjoy the show.
Well, great. It is great to be here in Chicago. Thank you, Elliot, Patrick, and the whole Benzinga team for another fantastic event. Also, thank you for trusting me to moderate today's keynote with one of Chicago's oldest and best cannabis companies, Cresco Labs. So, Charlie, I'm excited to talk about some of the factors that have made Cresco such a dominant player in the industry. But let's start out giving people some context. Can you talk about the history of Cresco and how you've gotten to be such a leader in the industry?
Sure, and I want to thank everybody for showing up this morning. I know it's an early morning on the second day of a conference, so I'm honored. The history of Cresco, this is our hometown. So, Cresco came to be back in 2013 when Illinois passed the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Act. And it was not only a watershed moment for myself, but I think it was a watershed moment for the industry. It was in that same month of August of 2013, you have a state, a significant sized state east of the Mississippi passing a very highly regulated, compliance-focused medical law. You also had the Cole Memo get issued, and you also had Dr. Sanjay Gupta's first documentary on weeds air on CNN. And so it was like a stars aligning kind of month as we look back on the history of cannabis. And that's what really created Cresco Labs. That's when it was founded. And the interest really from day one was to help normalize and professionalize this industry. I don't think you have to do a demand study to understand that people for 5,000 years have been enjoying cannabis for various reasons, medicinal and otherwise. It just needs to be done correctly in order for us to progress cannabis at a reform level. A very unique situation where you have states legalizing cannabis while it's still federally illegal. So the idea of getting into the space and helping to develop an industry that would be responsible, that could become respectable, and therefore become as robust as possible was the impetus for us getting into the space. First few years, of course, are figuring out how to get those first buildings built and get operational. You have scale over the coming years, going public in 2018. And then really, we start to see some choppiness in the industry, some real focus on making sure that you're executing operationally and that you're running as tight of an organization as possible. 2021, we were at that point in 8 states and really wanted to make sure that we had the footprint that would allow us to scale into the future with the organization. Attempted a large M&A deal. And again, I think it was a perfect example of the elements that are within your control and outside of your control in this industry. And here's a shocker, a lot are outside of your control. But I think it really imparts on what it takes to be successful in this space, which is the grit and the ability to problem solve and to pivot along with the ever-changing landscape that you're operating in. That's what happens when you're in a highly regulated industry that's going through regulatory reform on a state-by-state basis. I think right now we have 40 states in the U.S. that have what I think most would consider a legalized cannabis program, and every single one of them is different than the other in some way or another. So where we are now, if you look at 2023 for us was well known now as the year of the core, where we really did, after attempting the large M&A deal, we really needed to focus on our core business and making sure that we got Cresco Labs as tight and as sound and as efficient as we possibly could, which would then best prepare us for growth in the years ahead. So if you come to 2024 was really about making sure that we were prepared to capitalize on the catalysts that are in our footprint, the adult use conversions in states like Ohio and, knock on wood, Florida and Pennsylvania in the near future. And now we're prepared as a very solid, very tight, efficient company to go out and explore some more growth opportunities.
Yeah, I think in the past couple of years, most cannabis companies have found religion around spending. We've seen, I think, rampant SG&A cuts, but I think they were necessary, and I think they, in a lot of cases, have staying power. And Charlie, we recently had you on our podcast, Higher Exchanges, and you said something that I think about literally every couple of days, which you said it's just not, it was Year of the Core, it is Year of the Core, it's just who we are. So when you say Year of the Core is just who you are, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's part of the DNA, and I think it was eye-opening, right? I think everybody very bullish, very excited about the outcome in the 2020 election, the runoff in Georgia at the beginning of the year. I think you can see it in the market activity. I think all companies were at all-time highs in that Q1 of 21, and it's just been a slow degradation ever since as reform has been stalled. And I think as an organization, as a leader of an organization, as a person with fiduciary responsibilities to not only shareholders but all stakeholders, you have to recognize that trend. And what that meant was capital was going to be really difficult to get, and it was going to be really expensive if you needed it. And so the way to succeed in this current era of cannabis is you got to be tight, got to be efficient, you got to be self-sufficient. And so that was really the ethos, and it became part of the DNA of the organization. It was also not only how we were going to deal with choppy waters, it was how we were going to prepare ourselves to take advantage of the opportunities that were going to be in front of us in the years ahead. You had to be really solid, you had to be stable, and you had to be capital efficient in order to take advantage of those opportunities as we go ahead. So that's what we've done.
And scale is really important in cannabis, and you built not only a wide footprint, but a really productive one. You have 72 doors, you have a strong portfolio of brands, and you generated $184 million in revenue last quarter. Why is scale so important, and how do you see the importance of scale evolving over time?
So whenever an industry is structured in the way that this one currently is, which is state by state, you have to think about how you maximize efficiency in a very efficient obligation, which is to have independent supply chains in every state that you operate in. It's not the way that any other industry would build itself if you were trying to create efficiency. So you're controlling what you can control and making sure that you are, one of the things I'm very proud of that the team recognized and really leaned into over the past few years was figuring out where we have differentiated capabilities, figuring out where we've created these beneficial muscles that help us compete in the markets that we're in. I think if anybody's looking at the landscape ahead, you need size to create that capital efficiency. Again, when you're operating these independent supply chains, it's expensive. It's more expensive than it should be. It's capital intensive to build these things. It's capital intensive to operate them. So figuring out ways to get smarter and leaner and get more juice from the same squeeze is a primary focus. But you also have to be developing those skill sets that are transportable and that are transferable from state to state in the limited ability that you have to do it. So if you look at us, not only is it those capabilities from an SOP standpoint and cultivation and manufacturing and production methodologies, but it is that house of brands, right? We've developed a house of brands that's achieved #1 market share position in $3 billion markets, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. The ability to take that house of brands into that next state, into that next platform is a cannabis version of scale. And then also from the infrastructure standpoint, the more technology that you can incorporate into your business that gives you those unique capabilities and advantages, technology can travel. And so if you look at our retail platform, it's one of the things that the company's been really focused on over the last few years. Pre-COVID, and it served us very well during the early days of COVID too, was having that strong tech infrastructure that would allow us to do things a little bit faster, a little bit more efficient, with arguably less man hours needed to do the same things. It's repeatable, it's predictable, and it also is transportable into those next markets that we go into. So it's, the year of the core and the scale components combined allow for a well-run company that can also tack on additional markets and assets as we look to grow in the years ahead.
And so one of the challenges I see consistently in the industry, Charlie, is trying to get bigger, but still maintaining profitability and margins. So in my home state of California, you might be able to find 5 really great doors. You say you want scale, so you go to 10, but those next 5 stores aren't nearly as productive. Or you're in New Jersey, you have great margins and a healthy business, and over time, that market degrades. You know, New Jersey is still a profitable state, but just making the point that over time, in these adult use flips, it's often really profitable for the first couple of years, then it degrades. So how have you kind of walked this line or find the balance between getting more scale, but still being productive and having high margins?
It's a daily challenge. And because again, you're constantly having to deal with the new elements and the new levers and the new issues that pop up across your footprints. And there are plenty, and they're not going to stop. And that's, again, one of those muscles that you have to build, is to figure out how you do it. And you're constantly trying to forecast where this industry is headed, and at the same time understand the industry that you're in today. And I think that's if I was going to summarize sort of the first 10 years of cannabis, it really comes down to how well organizations have been able to speculate as to how fast this was going to go. Because in a super fast-moving emerging industry, profitability usually isn't an issue. There's funding for it. There's capital, because you just want to get that foot. You want to get the foot in the door. You want to grab that position. You want to plant the flags, and you want to create scale as fast as possible. But I would say one of the unique things about cannabis was that the music sort of stopped for this industry, along with most others, at various times in the development of it, and because of the uniqueness in our challenges to access capital or access it at any sort of reasonable cost, let alone the impact of 280E in taxation, not only are you fighting this fight with 1.5 hands tied behind your back, but then you are also expected to get profitable too. There wasn't an endless supply of capital to keep feeding the engine. You had to get profitable fast. So it's a constant evaluation, even today, on balancing growth, but with also maintaining margins.
Well, it wouldn't be a conversation about cannabis in 2024 if we didn't talk about politics and some of the exciting catalysts that are on the horizon. Charlie, Florida is important to the industry, certainly important to you. You have 33 stores in Florida. You have 5% of the flower market in the Sunshine States. Couple of exciting things happen. Well, one exciting thing particularly happening with the vote for Amendment 3 and adult use coming up shortly here. And also now we have the weather challenges in Florida. So I guess a couple of questions. One is, how optimistic are you surrounding Amendment 3, and how are your assets looking in light of the storms?
I think just to, and I'm sure it's been brought up already, addressing the storm, like thinking of everybody down in Florida. We have a lot of team members in that state, as you mentioned, 33 stores in a really large production facility. So we're keeping a close eye on it, because not only does it's going to create business disruptions and issues that have to be managed, but keeping an eye on the impact that it could potentially have on the vote that's coming up. And it's a really big vote, not only for cannabis, but for the country. Setting that aside and just objectively looking at the landscape and where the polling's coming in and sort of the temperature and feeling on the ground, there's optimism that we're going to have what is second, third most populated state in the country adopt an adult use law. I think significant increased likelihood of success of that came when former President Trump tweeted out his position, and that he was actually going to vote for it, which I think caught a lot of us in the industry by pleasant surprise. It's nice just to have, for the first time, I would say, in history, a really, the two leaders of the main political parties in the United States both be in favor of legalization is something that we should not miss and recognize the importance of it. Never had it before. Very important, and then specifically as it relates to Florida. But Florida is a big state, not, as I mentioned, from a population standpoint, just know that also carries that same amount of weight down in D.C. on both sides of Congress, too. So every time that you have a state that transitions and adopts a legalization platform in their state, you get that representation in D.C., and it impacts that federal reform conversation, too.
Yeah, Florida's so exciting, not just because of the 22 million people, but the 137 million tourists, which I think make it a particularly interesting opportunity that you don't get just the typical revenue expansion from adult use, but you also all of a sudden get these 137 million tourists that come down from our home states of Minnesota or Illinois and spend the winters or the spring breakers or all the other people visiting. So excited to see how that market evolves. I think the other big thing on the horizon, Charlie, is certainly Schedule 3 and the potential for 280E removal. We are just 54 days away from the ALJ hearing on December 2nd. What are your expectations around the hearing and how you see Schedule 3 evolving from here?
I wish I had more color and specificity on what I expect out of the hearings, much more than it's going to happen on December 2nd. These are unique. Each one can be different in the way that it proceeds. But I would say, again, feeling optimistic. Again, you have HHS recommendation, you have the DEA recommendation. I know that there was some concern over the fact that there was going to be a hearing on the issue and that it wouldn't go straight to final rule. But the one thing I can tell you from the conversations that we were having with senior leadership at the head of all of those the relevant stakeholder organizations that were involved, their main focus was making sure that the outcome would be defensible and durable, and whatever that meant, that's how they were going to proceed. And the hearing clearly was the decision that in order to make this as defensible and durable as possible, a hearing would be appropriate. I can't disagree with the logic. And that said, I think everybody has been optimistic about that moving forward. There was definitely, again, some concern that if this wasn't done before the election, that a potential Trump administration would come in and kibosh this. And again, it's the benefit of former President Trump's tweet, where I think he stated how excited he was to be able to research cannabis as a Schedule III substance. So you'd mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the de-risking of rescheduling because of the position now of both potential future administrations being in favor of it, feeling optimistic.
Well, I feel almost guilty talking about safe banking, given the number of pump fakes and failures that we've had on that front. But you did have some interesting comments that you made in the back. Do you want to share a little bit about your expectations for safe banking and specifically some of the variables people might look at as we head into the lame duck period, and what sort of a setup might be more favorable or more concerning for finally getting this legislation potentially done?
Sure. I'll give as objective and realistic position on this as I can. We do have interested senior level legislators on both sides of the aisle that are very interested in moving SAFE forward. Lame duck as the next viable opportunity will depend on what happens on November 5th. The lame duck itself is it's a fluid process and a fluid period of time. And so what happens in the Senate, what happens in the House, and what happens in the executive branch race will have an impact on what lame duck looks like. The things, again, that are in our control and outside of our control as an industry is it's up to us to continue to make sure that everybody who could be involved in a potential vote or a potential advocacy in D.C. on that front is as educated and as familiar with our issue as they possibly can be. I know there's a call to action that was launched here today. I believe the instructions are to text hashtag 250. Is that hashtag 250, right? Or pick safe banking and let your thoughts be known there. But that's what we can control, is make sure that our representatives that are down there in D.C. are as familiar and as informed as possible on this issue. Because, look, we're in as good of a position, I would say, as an industry can be. You've got the majority speaker, the majority leader of the Senate, who this is one of his top 3 initiatives, and then you have a very senior representative on the Republican side who also is a co-sponsor of this and is leading the initiative to get it done. If the opportunity is there to move it forward in lame duck, the expectation is that it will move forward. But what lame duck looks like is still to be determined.
Well, still some uncertainties, but when we talk about cannabis at Water Tower Research, I often say it's a state-led growth story with a series of hard-to-time political catalysts. And I like to underline the hard-to-time part because those have proven to be difficult to predict exactly when they're happening. But it's exciting to have a huge state like Florida, potential in Pennsylvania we didn't talk about today, obviously Ohio rolling out, Minnesota, I think, is kind of a quiet, exciting market for some operators. So it's exciting to see the expansion we're seeing on the revenue side from the new states, and exciting to see the potential for some more profitability and greater access to the investments continues to be one of the challenges as well. So maybe Schedule 3 and safer banking can enhance profitability through removing 280E, then also open up access to the investments. So certainly an exciting time in the industry. Appreciate everyone showing up. Charlie, great to talk to you.
Thank you,
That
Jesse.
concludes.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference.